open up the staff hearing officer meeting for June 14th, 2023. My name is Ellen Kokinda, the staff hearing officer today. We will start with preliminary matters, any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items. And I do not have any today, no announcements. I don't have any announcements or appeals. And let's see, and now I'm going to open it up for public comment for items not on today's agenda. So if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on an item not on today's agenda, you can submit a speaker slip. I have not received any written correspondence. And Ms. Gu, do we have anyone who wishes to speak at this time?
At this time, we do not have any raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, and then we can go ahead and start on our first item. This is 353 Oliver Road. This is a 6,207 square foot lot that's currently developed with a 1,043 square foot single-story residence with a 65 square foot covered porch and a 380 square foot detached two-car garage. The proposed project involves a 230 square foot addition to the front of the house and a new 56 square foot covered front porch. The front porch is set back approximately 14 feet from the front property line rather than the required 20 feet. The addition is in line with the side of the existing house and set back approximately 4 feet 7.5 inches rather than the required 6 feet from the interior property line. The discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer today are a front setback modification to permit the addition and the front porch within the required front setback, an interior setback modification to permit the addition within the required interior setback, and then lastly, to determine that the project is categorically exempt from further environmental review. And we have Mr. Baumann here today to present the staff report. Ms. Gu, could you switch over to the plans, please? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Whenever you're ready.
So now we'll just show what you just described. So this is the front part of the lot, the site plan where the existing house is. It's a relatively small house, so it's understandable they would want to do an addition. There's a pretty large oak tree, and they have a nice backyard, kind of a backyard playground. So they want to add on to the front of the house. Let's see. So the front of the existing house is right here, and there's a little porch existing. So they would add out like this for floor area, and then a new front porch in front of that. So the pink really shows the area of setback encroachment. There's the existing house is non-conforming to the south setback, so the addition would just follow the line of the existing to keep the roof and all that consistent. And interestingly, the way this house is situated, some of the houses, or looks like most of the houses on this side of the street are kind of, the front of the house is parallel to the street and to the front setback line, whereas this one's sort of at an angle. And in fact, maybe I'll just jump right into a little bit of a description of staff supportability. So the applicant initially submitted an application with a larger addition, similar front porch, or maybe the porch was a little larger and the addition was a little larger. And these types of staff supportability are difficult. I mean, all zoning modifications are different, but some of them are clearly supportable, some of them are clearly not supportable, and then some of them it's what kind of or how much encroachment is reasonable. So this is one of those reasonable judgment calls that staff made in terms of how much of an encroachment would be supportable. So we gave them some feedback, what we thought, we meaning myself and Maricela Salinas, the zoning supervisor. We gave the applicant some feedback in our completeness letter, what we felt could be supportable. And the applicant just took that recommendation specifically, and this is what we said we would support, which is allowing an addition that comes out to this point, meeting the setback line, but then having the project be square with the house where it runs at an angle to the front setback line. So that's kind of the key point where we based our supportability. Obviously, the front of the house would be square with the house. And then another component of that is the Title 30 zoning ordinance, which I don't know if we'll ever have those changes approved in the coastal zone. But anyway, Title 30 allows a front porch to encroach 6 feet into the front setback. So we've got that combination of the addition coming out to here and then the square line coming across and that 6-foot porch added to that, consistent with Title 30. So that's how we developed our supportability for this. I'll focus on the front part. This is existing floor plan and proposed. So it allows them a nice expansion to their house and a front porch, like I just described on the site plan. The project didn't trigger design review, so we don't have design review input. In my opinion, it's a very attractive design, like a traditional design for the house. Oops. So this would be the existing elevation, the lower one, and the upper one's proposed elevation. So it's really an attractive project, I think. The project's exempt from further environmental review. There were no issues at all with that. So I guess with that, we can just recommend that the staff hearing officer approve the project and make the findings. We've got them listed as two, well, they are two separate modifications, the front setback mod and the interior setback mod. If you are able to make the findings, one thing I noticed in the front setback modification findings provided on page 4, we didn't put in the clause about necessary to secure an appropriate improvement. So if you wanted to add that part, we think that would be appropriate as a addition to the findings that we have there. I think that's it for me, unless you have questions.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to invite the applicant to come up and walk us through anything you would like to add or qualify or share about this request.
Okay.
And if you could please introduce yourself, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle McToldridge with Shelter Architecture. Thank you, Tony. I think he covered a lot of the nuts and bolts of the addition off the front of the house and how we had it quite a bit farther out, but compromised with pulling it back so that one corner, I don't know how to flip through these pages, the one corner of the addition meets this blue line, which is the setback line, and then allow the house to stay parallel with his front. And then a whole area of the addition is also porch, which, you know, when you could look at it from the front is, you see right through it and beyond, so it doesn't feel bulky or massive. We kept the hip roof design, which keeps it kind of lower, low slung, and doesn't feel imposing on the street. And it's really to give the house a bit more curb appeal, a comfortable porch, and then allow for an added bathroom. And in fact, there's not a lot of enlargement to the spaces inside. Right across the street, which I think we, right here, you see where it says 360. These are two-story neighbors right across the street, and they are kind of a higher density housing, and these porches serve a bit of inspiration with their craftsman design. So, and they are actually much closer to the sidewalk and street than what we're proposing. So I think that the two complement each other right across from each other, and you can see that this is the inspiration for the same look in the neighborhood. There's this one right here is kind of the look we're after, but with a one-story version. You know, we explored the options to go to the side. There's a driveway right up against the house, and as Tony mentioned, there's a specimen tree in the backyard that really prohibits building out that way unless we were to remove it, and it also the added space just wouldn't work off those back bedrooms with the layout of the house. So this felt like the best way to achieve the goals. It's only a 230 square foot addition, but it will make the home a place this family can stay for years to come.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn it over and open up to public comment if there's anybody who wishes to speak on this item in the audience, or if we have anybody attending via Zoom who wishes to speak on this item.
At this time, we do not have any raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public comment then. And I can say that I did go out on site. I walked around the neighborhood. I understand the request. I mean, this is a fairly straightforward project, so it's not too complicated. I understand some of the constraints with the tree in the back, and also just the shape of the lot and kind of the position of the residence compared to that front lot line, and kind of how those angles kind of work together. And I thank you for, Mr. Bauman, you're walking me through the other design considerations and the appreciation that you all ended up pulling back your initial design to make it something that's more supportable. I mean, this is it's an extremely handsome design and project. I know it didn't trigger SFDB design review, but this is the kind of project that I think they would be extremely supportive of. It's very much an improvement to the residents, and something that you can. It's not only has better curb appeal, but then the functionality of the floor plan, you can look at that and see how this particular design supports that without being too extravagant in any way. So I really don't have much more. Again, this is fairly straightforward, and I agree with staff's assessment on this particular project, and I can make the findings for the front setback modification that it is consistent with the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance. Just one, because of the pattern of development, and I was going to add about it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on this lot, just given, again, the kind of considerations of the angles of the lot, and that and just thinking about the porch in general, that you're creating a much nicer facade along the street. And again, all as it's written here, that again, it's consistent with the general purposes of the zoning ordinance, and also how it's supported with in terms of how, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Essentially, how this is in line with our inland zoning ordinance under Title 30. And so that's also one reason it's supportable. And I can also make the same findings that for the interior setback modification, that it is consistent with the intent and purpose of our zoning ordinance and necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot, and for all the reasons that staff have outlined, as well as making the environmental review findings that it's exempt from further CEQA review. With that, there are no conditions of approval, and I wish you well. I just want to clarify that my decision can be, Ms. Gu, can you please switch it? My decision is, can be appealed within any point within 10 calendar days to the Planning Commission, or any planning commissioner could suspend my decision if they feel so. But ultimately, congratulations and good luck moving forward with your project. That's very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item B now. Let's see. And this is 3855 Cayecita. This is a 10,000 square foot site. It's currently vacant, and the proposed project involves a new 2,348 square foot two-story residence with a 432 square foot garage on a lot with an existing creek and drainage area, one coast live oak, and 1 olive tree would be removed with this particular development. 5 new replacement coast live oak trees would be planted, and the project includes restoration of the creek area. The discretionary applications under the jurisdiction of the staff hearing officer required for this project are the front setback modification to allow a portion of the building to encroach into the front setback, an interior setback modification to allow the building to encroach into the interior setback, and then lastly, to determine that the project is categorically exempt from further environmental review. And we have Ms. Kennedy here today, who is the staff, hang on just a second, let me pull those
We have
plans
a
up.
issue with the plans. I don't see them. Yeah. They're not in this folder. I don't know why. I didn't know. I asked Kathy about it.
Can you? We're going to do a 3-minute recess, and we're going to pull up the plans, so bear with us. Reconvene the staff hearing officer meeting, and we're on 3855 Cayecita. And we have Ms. Kennedy here today, and she is going to be presenting the plans and the report, and whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I'm Kathy Kennedy, project planner for this project. Thank you, Ms. Kukinda. First of all, I'd like to point to the project site here in this area. I'll enlarge it a little bit. So the project site is a 10,000 square foot vacant lot. It's adjacent to this other larger property, which is in the Santa Barbara County jurisdiction. It's owned by the Missionary Church, same ownership as the project site for today. And as I said, same ownership, so the purpose of this is to build a residence here for employee of the church. We'll just take a few, look at a few photos of the site. Here we have the site from Cayecita, looking down the street, the property to the left. Again, the property from the street. On-site property here, obviously a vacant lot with some vegetation, a very large oak tree, and then some neighboring photos. Here is the proposed site plan. So this is a proposal for a new two-story, 2,348 square foot residence, shown here. The street, Cayacita, is over here to the left. And there's an attached 432 square foot garage. As you can see, this lot is very constrained. There is a creek drainage area going through the property, so where this blue line is the flow line. There's another line here shown as the top of bank. So this whole area takes up almost half of the property. And from this line here to this other line, this is a 15-foot creek setback. Staff worked with the Creeks Division to determine the location and confirm that we all agree where the top of bank is and where the 15-foot setback from that is located. So that's located right through here. The modification requests are for an interior setback and a front setback, and the reason for that is to move this building as close or as far away from this creek setback area as possible. So the building has been moved this way to the west 2 feet, so it would encroach 2 feet into the 6-foot setback along here, and it's moved a little bit. This portion of the residence moved 5 feet towards the street, so it's a 15-foot instead of a 20-foot setback on this portion. This portion where the garage is would remain at the 20-foot required setback. So again, the purpose is to move the building down this way and move it out of this creek setback. You'll see, though, there is a portion of the first floor in this corner here in that creek setback, and there's also a portion of the cantilever deck along here in that setback. We'll look at the elevations of the proposed home. Down here in the lower left, this is that cantilever deck over the creek setback buffer area. So this project went to the Single Family Design Board on 2 occasions. They received positive comments on the project. They recognized that with an FAR of 75% of the max FAR, that it is similar to and within the range of the other homes in the neighborhood, and they were supportive of the modifications. They did have one condition that they're requesting. I'll move down to show you that. The landscape plan. So as you'll remember, one of the modifications is along here to move this building closer to the property line. This hedge here, the shrubbery hedge, the SFDB has requested that a condition be placed on the project to require this to be there in perpetuity, since this house is a little bit closer to the property line than normally would be allowed. There is also a 6-foot high fence along this property line. Part of the project is the creek restoration. There is a removal of a large oak tree, and then there would be replacement of 5 new oak trees in this area. All non-native plantings would be removed, and all new native from Santa Barbara stock plantings would be installed. Although the Creeks Division did recommend no development within the 15-foot creek buffer, planning staff has been supportive of minimizing the amount in that and has worked with the applicant to minimize it. So as I said before, there's a corner of the first floor here and a portion of the cantilever deck here that is within that creek buffer area. But planning staff is in support of that as proposed. We recommend approval of the project as proposed, subject to the findings in the staff report. The findings are based on the fact that this is a very highly constrained lot. Although it's large, a large portion of it includes this creek and creek setback, and that we support the modifications because of that. And we recommend that one condition of approval regarding the hedging along here to be required to be maintained in perpetuity. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. I'd like to invite the applicant up, who's here today, to walk us through any, if you could introduce yourselves for the record, please, and then just let me know if there's anything you wish to add about this particular request.
Sure.
I'm
And if
John.
you do, can you put the little button at the bottom of the mic? It's kind of, it says push, and then the green light will come on. It's hard to read.
Well,
I know, it's hard, but it's less for us, but more from people sitting in the back and then our recording.
okay, I'm John Shuck, and I'm representing the owner, which is Pastor Jim Firth, whose house this will be. Kathleen touched pretty much most of the things, but we've been in process probably for a year going through the planning staff and the SB, Santa Barbara Design Board. And I wanted to mention, initially, we had encroached, the garage was moved up to 15 feet, and at the request of planning, I don't know if you can show that, Roland, we moved the bottom half of the house back so that the face of the garage door is at the 20-foot setback line. You got it on the site plan? Oh, there you go. Back to the floor plan. Okay, so that is, as you can see, the line that we moved it back to 20. It was, everything was up, the house up at the 15-foot line. So the encroachment on the north part of the thing is primarily a 4-foot porch, and then 1 foot of the house. So that was a suggestion of planning. As was said by Kathleen, the church in and of itself owns the entire property to the east, which is 3 acres, and this is for their pastor. And that's primarily it. I did note that we had one letter that was in support from Elaine Mabest, and she supported the 2-story residence, supported the project as what we were requesting. Roland, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Roland Fournier, Fournier Design Studio, and nothing more to add. Covered.
All right, thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn it over and open up to public comment. If there's anybody in the audience who wishes to speak on this particular item for 3855 Callecita. I do want to acknowledge in the meantime that I did receive an email correspondence from Elaine K. Ma, and I read that, and so that's part of our record. Do we have anybody attending via Zoom who wishes to speak?
I do not see any raised hands for this particular item at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gu. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and then open it up. Similarly, I've actually been tracking this project very closely at the Single Family Design Board, so I'm very familiar with the evolution and the responses and very familiar with the site and your constraints. I had some questions today about kind of some of the design considerations, but I understand that you followed staff's recommendation to push the garage opening back to meet the setback. Understanding the site, this is a highly constrained lot, just given the creek, and we're looking at, given that it's vacant and trying to figure out what is an appropriate location for development. It just doesn't make sense to put something into a creek. And so I really appreciate all of the work that's gone into trying to design this and do the siding in an appropriate location so that there can be creek restoration. This is a much bigger project possibly than you might have started off thinking that it would be, given the site constraints. And it just, anywhere else on the lot, it just doesn't make sense. There's really no other place. And this particular structure, it's 2 stories. There are other 2-story residences in the neighborhood. As you mentioned, the immediate neighbor is church property. So there's kind of the context it doesn't necessarily fit, having one single-story homes all lined up in a row, although there are some adjacent along the street. So I honestly, again, having followed this very closely with the Single Family Design Board, I feel like they've done their job to kind of help provide their feedback, kind of make this a better project. I can 100% support the siting location and can support the front setback modification because it does meet the intent and purpose of our zoning ordinance and it is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot, and that there's kind of an unreasonable hardship due to the fact that there's the creek basin here, and kind of the minimizing any kind of development or excessive paving or new driveway that would be required on site, that this siting is appropriate for that. So I agree with staff's assessment, and I also agree with the Single Family Design Board's support of the site and the constraints, just in the fact of kind of looking at the other parcels and what's appropriate size and scale for the neighborhood. And with that, I can also make the findings for the interior setback for the same reason, that it's consistent with the general purpose of the zoning ordinance. It's necessary to secure the appropriate improvement on the lot, and given the hardship of the unreasonable hardship on the site. My decision is I can support SFDB's input and staff's drafting of the condition of approval that, given the proximity to the interior lot line, that you would need to maintain some kind of hedging along that westerly lot line, and so that would be part of the decision for these particular modifications. And this it goes without saying, but by approving this, I also am believe that this project is exempt from further environmental review. So I want to call out that my decision can be appealed within 10 calendar days of today. And do we have, Ms. Good, can you flash that slide on screen? Or any member of the Planning Commission could pull this item if they see fit. But ultimately, from here, you'll go back to the Single Family Design Board for project design approval, and I wish you well with your project. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. One last item. Okay. And Mr. Patton, can you pull up the plans for that? Let me know when you're ready with those. All right, so we have item C. This is 209 Barranca Avenue, and it's a 5,694 square foot lot. It's currently developed with a 773 net square foot single-story residence with a 105 square foot covered porch and a 197 net square foot detached one-car garage. The project addresses violations and enforcement case number ENF 2022-004057 for unpermitted work. The project includes additions to the existing 733 net square foot one-story house consisting of a 43 net square foot bedroom addition with gable roof on the front, enclosure of the front porch, creating a 105 net square foot addition, new windows and doors, and complete interior remodeling with new mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, repair of the existing garage, and new patio at the back of the house. The construction of overheight fencing along the front lot lines was referred to the Single Family Design Board for review under a separate application. So the discretionary actions under the purview of the staff hearing officer today are front setback modification to permit the alterations and additions of floor area within the required front setback, and then to determine that the project is categorically exempt from further environmental review. And we have Mr. Baumann here today to present this project. And if I could ask Ms. Gu to switch back over to the plans, we've got those pulled up. Great, please, whenever you're ready.
Morning, Ms. Kokenda. Thank you for the project description. I think with that, I'll Well, here's the overview of the site. It's at the corner of Barranca Avenue and Barranca Lane, over near City College. This shows the the existing house. This is the setback line, and this is an addition that was done without permits. Let me go to a different exhibit here. Okay, this is better. This shows the existing permitted house. Pretty small house, so it's understandable why someone would want to do an addition to it. But the setback line from Barranca runs right through here. This is one just simple roof form, a hip roof. This is a front porch. So the front wall is here, but the roof line just is a straight roof line for the whole house. So the work that was done was enclosing this front porch and then popping out an addition to the front here with a new gable roof facing the front. I think that describes the project. There's some other proposed improvements like renovating, restoring the garage and adding a patio at the rear and stuff, not under the purview of the staff hearing officer. The project also didn't require any design review, so we don't have any opinion from the design review board about compatibility and that sort of thing. So, like I mentioned earlier for a previous project, it's a tough call in terms of what amount of an encroachment would be reasonable. Staff we tend to take a conservative position with as-built work because, well, like the first item on today's agenda, Oliver Road, when a project's proposed and requesting a modification, we have the opportunity to do some back and forth working with the applicant and the owner to come up with something that we think is supportable. But once it's built, there it is, and we're forced to make a call on supportability. So this requires one modification, one front setback modification, but our staff report kind of addresses two project components separately. One is that enclosure of the front porch, which we felt is reasonable. It provides more floor area for the house without really moving the actual building further forward toward the street and more into the setback, given that it's under the existing roof form. So that was pretty easy to support. We struggled more with the addition to the building footprint toward the street, given that the house is already encroaching and then now it's getting closer with this addition. When I did my site visit early on, I walked the whole length of Barranca and looked at this west side of Barranca in particular. The opposite side of the street's a different zone. I think it's R2 zoning, so it has different requirements. But I could tell walking the street that there's not a consistent pattern of all the houses being set back the same distance, and also that there was definitely some houses along there that encroached to varying degrees. But having said that, like I said, we took a fairly conservative position on our staff recommendation because it's unpermitted, and the addition that is unpermitted. Since then, I know the owner and the applicant, they've spent a lot of time studying the neighborhood. I suggested they do that. I could tell, like I said, from my walk in the street, that there is some encroachment along the street. It was hard to tell whether this is consistent with that, but the owner subsequently put a lot of time into a study of that, how far the other houses are set back. And I think he's made a pretty good case. I think he has some pretty good evidence about a pattern of setback encroachment on the street. So I would add to our staff recommendation that you seriously consider the information that he submitted in his applicant letter. And I guess another thing worth mentioning in terms, because we talked about our supportability considers conforming options, and going back to the site plan here. Oops. So looking at the site plan, I guess one thing worth pointing out in terms of what options there would be for additions, this shows the open yard area being 1,278 square feet. So 1,250 square feet would be required. So that really wouldn't provide an opportunity to add onto the back of the house without an open yard modification. Staff's position on front setback modifications versus open yard, we tend to be more supportive of open yard mods than front setback mods. But there would be this, here's the front setback, interior setback. So there would be this area available for an addition. Similarly over here, front setback and another front setback. This area would provide an area of potential addition, although it might not work well with the floor plan. But I think I'll leave it there because I know the owner wants some time to present his case, and I suggest you seriously consider what he's prepared.
Mr. Baumann, quick question. And this is non-conforming to covered parking. So there's the one covered parking space or the
Right.
one garage that
Right.
is can you remind me, is the replacement part of this project or the demo rebuild, or is that?
It's a restoration.
A
Because it's
restoration.
you can see that garage is non-conforming to a front setback and an
Right.
interior setback. So the owner's intention is to do the amount of restoration that he can do without triggering a modification.
I
The
see.
coastal zoning ordinance Title 28 doesn't allow for much improvement in that situation without a mod. So the intention is to kind of restore it back as it was permitted.
Okay. And otherwise, there's no other uncovered parking spot on the site, correct?
Not formally. I don't remember what's actually on the site, but
Okay.
that is the permitted parking. And
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to invite the applicant to come up. If you could please introduce yourself and kind of walk me through this request and kind of how it started and
Yeah,
and then we'll go from
absolutely.
there. Thank you.
We also have a presentation that I'd like to get to. Tony, I don't know,
Oh.
maybe you can help me there.
Let's see. Is it in the folder?
It should be.
is it something in addition to your applicant letter?
There's a presentation that I'd like to walk
Okay.
through.
Hang on just a second. We're going to do a quick recess and we can pull it up. Hang on just a second.
Here, I don't know where you keep these.
Start again, whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you. My name's Craig Minus. I'm with CAM Land Use and Development, and I serve as the applicant project land planner. The applicant and owner, Jacques Haber, is also here. And we wanted to thank you for having our item today. We've supplied a number of materials, including an applicant letter, our project plans, and this presentation. So in the interest of time, I'm going to just kind of walk through this presentation. But we wanted to kind of start off by saying we understand the project kind of got off on the wrong path, probably didn't follow the correct planning procedures, and for that, the applicant apologizes. But with staff's help, we believe we're now kind of on the correct path. and is a large part of why we're here today. So we just want to acknowledge that, and it's acknowledged in the staff report, so I wanted to say that. As Tony said, we're seeking a front yard setback modification for 43 net square feet of living space. I'll walk you through this, but the basis for our request is a constraint, site condition, neighborhood compatibility, financial hardship, and kind of preservation of the existing lot and trees. Let me walk you through this a little bit. These are our existing site conditions. I think it's important to note we're a corner condition. We are a generally small lot, less than 6,000 square feet. It is a single story, single family home. Again, on a highly constrained corner lot. I think it's worth noting that historically there was a portion of the lot that was encumbered by the city, which again kind of just further constrains the opportunity on the lot and makes it a small lot. And when you look at our front yard or our front yard modification request, it is relatively minor, or it's pretty substantial when you consider what was kind of taken from the front yard here. So those are existing site conditions, and I can come back to this and explain that further. The proposed project, again, is retaining the single family or the single story, single family home. It would be a total of 845 square feet, which we believe is, a really modest single-family home in this area. We believe it's, appropriate with the neighborhood. Tony started walking you through the open yard space, and so this illustration just, emphasizes that. When we look at opportunities to improve the house, one of the constraints is that open yard space, and that plays an effect on why the configuration of the house is proposed as it is, and I'll kind of walk you through that. But in addition to the structure improvements, there's a number of other site improvements that we are proposing and will be doing, including permeable surfaces, improvement of landscaping, bringing other components of the house up to current codes, and generally, correcting a rather dilapidated structure, one that has kind of had a history of issues with the city, and so I think, we now have an owner that is looking to correct that, which I think is admirable. Okay, again, the modification request, Tony did a good job explaining that. There's two additions that are occurring here. One is the enclosure of the existing front porch, which staff was supportive of. The second is this 43 square feet of addition that would, intrude into the front yard setback. So we wanted to acknowledge that, when you look at the setbacks over time, it appears that there was not this 20-foot setback historically. And then when you look at kind of the ramifications of our 43 square feet intruding into the front yard setback, we still kind of maintain a consistent 13-foot, 7-inch setback, and we'll illustrate why that is compatible with the neighborhood in a further slide. This is somewhat repetitive. Just a slide that articulates that front yard porch or the front porch enclosure, and then the 43 square feet, 43 square foot addition. Again, this really only occurs for 14 feet of the facade, which is relatively minor. I won't read all this, but the purpose of this slide is to articulate that we did look at alternatives here. Again, I'll explain on a further slide, but, looking at the livability of this home, again, we're keeping it at a modest 845 square feet. We looked at alternatives, and kind of expanding into the west was challenging because of the open yard. When we look on the interior, the opportunity really was to go out towards Barranca to allow for the livability of the house, including a kind of a modest size primary unit and the addition of a second bathroom to make a 2-2, which is really for this neighborhood a kind of a customary kind of living situation. So again, the project is proposing an 845 square foot single-family home, which we believe is, very modest in size. Again, the primary bedroom would increase to 140 square feet, which again is kind of customary to today's living. You can see that this is the result of the 43 square foot addition, which would be in here. And again, when you look at the livability of this, what that allowed for us to do is to have kind of a customary primary, and then to introduce a second bathroom to make a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, which is, kind of very current with today's living standards. We included this slide just to give you some sense of existing condition, and we studied the architecture quite a bit internally. We did do the 43 square foot addition with purpose, and again, partly because the alternatives didn't present strong options for us, plus the opportunity to improve the front facade, both kind of culminated in what we did. But this is the existing facade, again, prior to the front porch, which staff was again supportive of, prior to enclosing that. So you can imagine if we enclose that front yard or that front porch, it kind of makes this boring facade, kind of single roof line facade, which, we think there was a better opportunity to enhance the neighborhood with some articulation. And so this is just this kind of a sketch of what we envisioned, which again kind of shows that projection of that 43 square feet adds character and articulates and enhances kind of the existing condition. Tony was right. We spent a lot of time on this, and so hopefully I'm not boring you watching my time.
You're going to know this neighborhood better than anybody else.
We know it very well. The owner has put a lot of effort into studying this. This is just an aerial, and we included it because it is a mature neighborhood. We have a number of existing trees. Again, we were a corner lot, so we are constrained in that fashion, and so. You can see that we have some existing, a number of existing trees on both frontages. Again, with the open yard back here being constrained, we really kind of have a constraint on every side when you start looking at tree locations and the open yard. And so we wanted to, keep it a single story. So there are a number of things that are going on here, and I thought that this slide does a good job at, showing kind of what a CAD plan doesn't. And so we've got existing conditions there that are constraints. This next slide, I probably want to spend a little more time on, and I can walk you through it. But we did spend a lot of time looking at the neighborhood and the streetscape and ensuring that what we've done and proposed is compatible with the neighborhood. And so this is a illustration of Barranca Avenue. We are the yellow site here at 209. And what this graphic does is it locates the 20-foot setback from along Barranca Avenue. And the purpose of this, again, as Tony, illustrated when he walked the neighborhood, there wasn't a consistent pattern. And what we actually found was when you look at the streetscape up and down Barranca Avenue, there are a number of existing structures that actually impede into that front yard setback. And so I can zoom in if you'd like, but there's a blue line here that represents that 20-foot setback. And so all of the parcels that are in this pink color do intrude into that. And so, it's a beautiful street. It's, very comfortable to walk on. Even with our 43 square foot addition in there, we will be consistent with other patterns in the neighborhood. And so I think that was a really important component to acknowledge. Tony also acknowledged the other side of the street, which is a different zoning. But I think it is worth noting that, if you applied a setback over there, every single structure on the other side of the street is impeding to that front yard setback. So we're asking for modification because that's the process. But when we look at the streetscape and we've done our homework, we can honestly say we think we're very compatible with the neighborhood, and we've gone through the extra effort to illustrate that. So again, I won't spend too much time, but I wanted to bullet out the benefits of the project, which again is, enhancing the lot and enhancing the structure and the architectural character of the neighborhood. We're really improving a rather dilapidated existing structure and a property that kind of had, historic issues with the city over time. So that's the owner's intent, is to correct that and make it a attractive and nice lot and single family home. We would like to preserve the lot as is with respect to the trees. We think it's an established lot with mature trees, and so again, keeping it to a modest square footage was important. Keeping it to a single story was important. And so we've taken that into consideration. And then again, the bump out of the 43 square feet was intentional with respect to livability of the unit, with respect to aesthetics, architectural aesthetics, and enhancing what we think is a improved facade. Along the lines of good neighbor policy, we were proactive in that, and we did reach out to the neighborhood to get their feedback and to try to obtain support for the project. And this slide just articulates the number of neighbors that have supported what we're doing, and I wanted to illustrate that we've went through the extra effort to reach to the neighborhood and ensure that there was support there. So again, we've reviewed the the findings required for you to make this modification, and again, based off of city ordinance code, we believe that the modification is consistent with the purpose and intent of the titles and necessary to secure the appropriate improvements on the lot, prevent unreasonable hardship, and to promote uniformity on the improvements, and also consistent with code. The project is not injurious to public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare. And I did it with 45 seconds left.
Nice
Thank you,
work.
that concludes.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to public comment and open public comment up for this item for 209 Barranca Avenue. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this item, you can come on up. If you haven't filled out a speaker slip, why don't you come on up and introduce yourself, and then I would just ask that you fill out the speaker slip afterwards, and give it to Ms. Gu.
Okay.
Hang on just one second. So if you could just introduce yourself, and then you'll have 2 minutes to speak whenever you're ready.
So I'm Lucille Villa, and I do live on Barranca Avenue. Would like to note that a number of those properties there are older properties, and so I don't know when the setback was established, but they were built before that setback was established. And for the property one of the properties that was shown, which is mine, when we did do a remodel or an addition, we had to represent the setback. So the old part of the house encroaches on the setback because it's over 100 years old, but the newer part was built with the setback, and we had to adhere very strictly to those rules. I'm also, you note that the person at 1102 Del Mar supports, and I believe that is your property too. So I was curious as to why you had someone else's name there as the owner.
Owner of the property is my wife.
Oh, it's your wife, okay. And that is an Airbnb.
It is.
And this property will be an Airbnb.
It's a legal Airbnb.
Oh, hang on just a second. First of all, there shouldn't be conversation. I'm sorry, I'm
Okay.
just blanking, but really, this isn't a conversation between you. You should just be speaking
Okay,
to me
so
right
just
now.
to- okay,
But
so-
so you can tell me your concerns, or
Okay.
just any thoughts that you have.
So my
to use
concerns
this.
is, yes, that he owns the property adjacent to it, and that is being used as an Airbnb, and that they were referring to this as a single-family residence, but it will be used as an Airbnb too. So, and those are, and also, in speaking about making improvements to the facade, they've also built a 6-foot fence, so you don't see the facade. So in terms of that being an argument for having to push out and make it look better, it just seems to contradict itself. So I'd just like to bring up those points.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I do want, for the record, to acknowledge Cindy and Bob Perlis, Kate and Mike McInnes, Gwen M. Brown and Russell R. Johnson, Stacy Gomes and Monaco Casillas, and
There
is
isn't
anyone
anyone on
wishing
Zoom.
to speak via Zoom? Okay, so I can go ahead and close public comment. And then if we go back to the plans, give me just one second. You're on the plan, or yeah, we're good. And I'm gonna have some questions. So I might have a mix of questions, comments, but so it's always unfortunate when somebody builds without building permits, and that's just, it's learning the hard way. I mean, no, like this is not a comfortable position to be in. And Mr. Bauman's right in terms of staff's stance will definitely be more conservative when it's an as-built situation, because we're here to want to make sure we do all of this beforehand. I appreciate the acknowledgement. We're here where we are. I appreciate the amount of time, and clearly there's a lot of effort to try to make up for that and to work on that. I mean, if this project had just gone through the normal process, it wouldn't trigger single-family design board review. It doesn't, it's not a second story, it's under 17 feet in height. So it would just come to the staff hearing officer for this particular thing, for this setback modification. And on the whole, I think what you're asking for is not too terribly significant. This is, I mean, the first thing that stood out was, what was it, 773 square feet. It's tiny. I mean, it's really super, super tiny. And I want to share that I also walked the neighborhood, looked at the site, kind of understand the context of the neighborhood, was trying to kind of look at the similar, like, is there a pattern? If so, what are the patterns? Didn't find any consistent. I mean, it's consistently non-conforming, so is probably one way of putting this. I appreciate, my questions were going to be around looking at other options. And again, this is a different context because the portions of it it's already been constructed in a certain way. And I just want to walk through some of my thinking on this. If we could go back to the site plan, please. So, and that's fine. You could stay on that one slide. No, the one with green. Yeah, there we go. So I took a hard look at this, and something that's also kind of, so a couple things stand out. Just the small size of the residence in and of itself. The fact that this is a corner lot. Anytime I see a corner lot, you know, there are always going to be more constraints because you're going to have two front setbacks. And then I start to look at, okay, well, what is this what is the setback telling me? How does it relate to the street? What's happening alongside in the neighborhood? You know, you made the choice of, you know, you could dig into the open yard a little bit, which would trigger an open yard modification potentially. This property is non-conforming to parking, so it's got one covered parking space. So generally our zoning ordinance requires two covered parking spaces, but that's not the case. So, or again, this is non-conforming, and so the idea of bumping out into the courtyard area, there could be, you know, it might keep you from being able to have a second covered parking space on site or even a second uncovered parking space on site. So, I mean, again, that's not what's being proposed, but I'm just looking at kind of certain considerations and understand what makes sense with the existing structure in the floor plan. So I understand the reason you're doing the addition, the request to do this front setback modification within that particular front setback to make sense of your floor plan and kind of the path of least resistance, or you know, from a construction standpoint, that you're not doing things here and there, that it's a little bit more contained. Couple things about, I think that now if you could go to the elevation, if you could go to that front, or the sketch. So given where the residence was, I know it doesn't look like that today, but given what it was very simple design. I mean, you know, this is kind of like post-World War II housing situation. And I can look at this and say that this is an improvement on the site, that you've got kind of a nice context. I can appreciate you pulling out the bedroom so that it does encroach more into the front setback, because I do think that that creates more of an interesting facade and interesting front. But I want to, one of the biggest things that I'm concerned about for this particular project is actually the fencing along the front, and so there's fencing, but then there's also been hedges that have been installed without permits. And I understand that Mr. Bauman asked that you have a separate PLN application for that to track that. And I want to acknowledge a mistake on staff's part, that was approved administratively by SFD, received an SFDB administrative approval, and that shouldn't have been the case. So I want to just share that that was a mistake, and I'm going to have to, this is going to be new information to you right now, but that shouldn't have been done, and that needs to go to a public hearing at the Single Family Design Board for that. And my concern about that fence is the fact that it's now, you know, by having a tall fence, you're blocking you're essentially blocking the front facade of the residence and, you know, the proper front as we think of it. I mean, I know you technically have two front setbacks, but this is the front door, kind of the front area, and the whole purpose of not having tall fences or like extremely tall hedges in the front is that we, in terms of neighborhood patterns and development, we don't want to build fortresses around our homes, and that was very much an intention. So I have concerns about that, and will want the single, like it, as it properly should be processed, that those fence is going to have to go to the Single Family Design Board just on consent. It's not a full board project, so we hold those meetings weekly, but that's a concern. With the concern, the member of the public's concern about the short-term rental. So this is zoned single family. There are specific requirements and standards that a short-term rental, if, Mr. Baumann, do you mind answering? Do you want to come up here and just respond? I don't know if this is the first time you've heard that. But essentially, just like there is a process to get to get your proper planning approvals and building permit application, the same would go for any short-term rental. And I don't think this zone allows short-term rentals, or if
No.
so.
Single-family residential zone doesn't allow, a short-term vacation rental is considered by the city to be the equivalent of a hotel. And it's allowed in commercial zones and also in the RMH zone, which allows hotels, but that's it.
So I just want to acknowledge that's the case, and if this property were to be in a zone that allows for hotels, then you'd have to go through the proper planning approvals and building permit approvals for that. So that's just context. So I can go ahead and make the findings for the front setback modification to enclose that front porch. And then the addition to the bedroom, because it makes for, again, this is a very modest improvement. You could have put a second story on it. You could have built it up, made a really huge development. So I think on the whole, it's probably appreciated by your neighbors to kind of keep it contained, keep it a little bit smaller. So I can make the finding that it's consistent with the purposes of the zoning ordinance and necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. I can also say that there is a hardship on the lot given the two front setback, and that just to try to work with the existing floor plan and do something that is a modest addition. That's part of my thinking, and it's such a tiny home, and you're trying to minimize construction impact. So it's on a corner lot, your modest improvement, you're making this, it's necessary for, it's an appropriate improvement because you've got a much nicer facade than what was there prior. It's simple, but again, it's simply elegant, and I think that's an improvement to the neighborhood. I don't get the sense that this design is impacting any trees on the lot, which was something that I looked at. But I am going to condition that the fence and hedges must go to a public hearing as it's listed in our guidelines for the Single Family Design Board to review. So again, it's essentially, I know that there's that separate process, separate planning application, but that wasn't processed correctly, and that it really needed a public hearing. Mr. Baumann.
There's a design review part of it, but also to exceed 3.5 feet in height, it would require a minor zoning exception.
Correct.
Approved by the community development director.
So
I
there's
believe.
two pieces to that. So unfortunately, fences are so difficult process-wise, it's excessive, but there's two pieces to that. The Single Family Design Board reviews the aesthetics of it and the appropriateness of the request, and then the community development director approves the increased height. So anything over 3.5 feet within 10 feet of the front lot line. So there's kind of a 2-point process. So there's kind of a communication that the single-family design board will review, and then the director will essentially make the final call. But I'm just saying, I have concerns. I just want my concern to be noted that I'm concerned about the fence height, given that this is the front facade, and that doesn't necessarily comply with the rest of the neighborhood. I will acknowledge that your neighbor has an overheight fence. I don't know if that has a building permit and if it received proper review. So if you're asking, well, my next door neighbor, I'm not sure about that. So and if you'd like to ask a question, if you don't mind turning your mic on.
Jacques Haber, the owner, thank you. The hedges, which are planted and are part of the process, part of the application, will be maintained at 6 feet.
So if that's your interest, that's a request, and that requires a special, that requires an exception, a minor exception, because you're not supposed to have the zoning ordinance allows anything over 3.5 feet within the first 10 feet of your front property line is anything under 3.5 feet doesn't require any kind of special approval or building permit. But anything over within 10 feet of the front lot line requires a minor exception by the community development director. And because it's along the front, it requires the single family design board review. So you properly submitted, following Mr. Bauman's instructions, to receive those approvals. However, it was staff's error that it was approved administratively when it needs a public hearing. So again, I apologize for that. And but that's my big concern, that by I'm totally supportive of this, and it's a little bit more to, again, it's a fairly straightforward public hearing to do that. But if you're trying to create this as like the front, I have concerns about having a really tall fence in that area. So I can share, so that would be a condition of approval. And then I can also say that this project is exempt from further environmental review, following what staff has written in the report, and can share that my action is appealable within 10 calendar days, and any member of the Planning Commission could also pull my decision, and if they so wish. But I think that, again, it's always harder to do this stuff after the fact, but I appreciate the work that went into it. I think you have a really handsome project right here. This is a really lovely design. I think that in spite of the situation, this will be very much an improvement to this corner, and certainly with renovation of the garage, it's very much appreciated, and just that last piece of the fencing will need to be addressed. And do you have any other questions?
First of all, thank you very much for your findings and your conclusion. And I would like to make some remarks on record and mostly address my neighbor, who I've never met before until today. The 5 letters that were written in support of the project are neighbors that I have met and I've known for years, who have been following the projects. And so I'm very much available to any neighbor to discuss and to strategize, and if there's ever any issue. I will say that when the property was acquired in October.
And just refer to me, I think.
I apologize. Yeah.
This person can hear.
I don't want to be respectful, but
Yeah,
when the property
absolutely.
was acquired in October of 2022, just I guess it's 8 months now, we thought that it was going to be an interior remodel. We thought we were going to be repairing some damages from some water damage, things like that. And as we went further into the project, it had been so neglected that it would have been a matter of months if we had a bad season of rain before that entire structure fell. And that property had not been maintained in any capacity. And that is why the city of Santa Barbara condemned the project 3 times in the last 30 years. So when we began, we are on record having visited the city before we actually closed on the property to begin the process of permitting for the fence as well as for the structural repairs. And after we started the repairs and we started going through over-the-counter permitting and so forth, we realized the time frame was going to be way longer than to abate things that were going to happen with the storm. So we had to make some decisions to avoid losing the house. Now, we've lost the garage because we didn't touch the garage. But if you look at the garage, it was tarped as best as we could. But given the calamity of the 2022-23 rainstorms, the garage has to be refurbished, totally restored. And that was really the impetus. And the specific facade you see, and the reason why that was, when we found all the problems with the roof joists and so forth, it was like, you know, do you repair it half of the way or do you repair it completely and do what you were intentionally and long-term going to do? So I apologize that we did things out of order, okay, I do. I just don't want the city or the staff hearing officer to think that there wasn't due diligence, a lot of back and forth with the city in October before any work had begun. And the mitigating factor here is the condition of the property with the impending storms.
Certainly, and again, I appreciate that, and I think that, you know, I think I really appreciate all the work that you've done to get to this point and address it, and I 100% think that this is going to be a massive improvement to that corner and to the neighborhood, and in general, that's, you know, what we're looking for, and so that's kind of the care and appreciation. So again, it's just unfortunate, and that it was a situation you purchase into this, you know, and I don't even know all the details going back and all the history, but there are a number of properties that have been left to neglect, and then you try to figure out what the next best thing is. So again, it's always in everybody's best interest to not have to go back and get all the approvals, and that's just, it's time, money, heartache, and, you know, and just the feeling of the neighborhood or neighbors and kind of where we are. But again, I think that this is going to be a great improvement, and we just want you to get over the finish line and get this wrapped up. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And that concludes the staff hearing officer meeting for June 14th.